So the next lesson is lesson 7 in the book, Transitions and Effects. We continue on with the same project we've been working on, but we do go to our rough cuts, and we do go to 03 Transitions and Effects timeline. To begin with, all you're going to do is use this first marker to go to the clip, and we're just going to show them how to create a little fade in by dragging the handle and fading that up. The next thing you're going to do is just go to the third red marker, and that puts you at the beginning of the clip to go from this white shot to this blue shot. It's a good way to create a transition. You're going to select this cut point. If you want to zoom in, you can. And then when the transition is selected, you can go up to the timeline and say add transition. That adds your cross dissolve. You can play over it. You can show them how, just like in the cut page, you can stretch it out or shrink it to create the dissolve you want. But you can also show them the edit page has a whole inspector of controls where you can change whether it's centered or starting or ending on the cut, the cross dissolve, or if you want to make it a wipe or some kind. We're going to change this to a film dissolve and then choose to play it and people can see the change. If you want to make it ease in, ease out, you can do that. And then you're going to save it as a preset. So you right click over it in the timeline, create transition preset, give it a name, film dissolve, and then say okay. Now where did it go? It went into the effects library. You'll scroll down to the user section. If you just want to look at video transitions, you can go all the way down to the bottom. It will show up there where it says with a little yellow icon under user film dissolve or whatever you named it. Then you can right click over it and add set this as a standard transition, which means when you set that as a standard transition, if you choose add transition or choose command or control T, it will automatically add this transition instead of the standard cross dissolve, the linear cross dissolve. You're going to come in here and swap out this effect with a blur dissolve. You're just going to grab the blur dissolve, drag it right on top, and see how you can switch it, and now you have a nice blur dissolve effect. That's going to bring us into other resolve effects. So you can come in and you can click on the resolve effect category. We're going to go to the very last blue mark or red marker here. This is going to be your add resolve effects. So here we want to add a tilt shift blur. If you don't know where to find it, you can just click on the magnifying glass and type in tilt. This is the only DaVinci Resolve Studio item that we do here, but it's meant that if you do it with the free version, that it will come up with a watermark and show that you can still use it. So either way, this is a good one to use. I'm just going to add it to the effect, select it. When you select it, the inspector now has an open effects tab, and you can start to control it, the center of the X and Y, the angle, things like that. It's kind of hard to see the effect on a real image, or at least control it. So it's nice to turn on the depth map preview. And when you do that, what's black is going to be the stuff that has no blur on it, and what's white is going to be pure blur. And then you have this gray in between, which is the fall off. So you can really easily control how much blur is in the bottom and in the top, much easier than looking at the image. And when you're close to being set, you can then just turn it off and you have the effect you wanted. If you want to remove the effect, you come up to the inspector and click on the little trash icon to remove it. Once you're done with that, we are going to go into reframing shots. That has to do with this first interview clip. We're going to select it. We're going to come up to the timeline and turn on output blanking 239 to give it a more cinematic look with letterboxing. The problem is that his head gets cut off, so you go into the transform and lower the Y so that he has a little bit more headroom. Now the problem is that you have other interview shots in here. So you're going to select the clip, you're going to choose to copy, come up to timeline, select clips color navy, and then you're able to choose to edit paste attributes. When the paste attributes windows come, you're just going to click on position and apply, and now these other interview clips also have that same framing that you did on this first one. Then you're going to go back to this shot of the Bay Area and do some keyframing. So you'll definitely want to zoom in so the Bay Area shot kind of fills the screen here. You're going to select it so that it is in the inspector. You'll talk about the controls in the inspector and the on-screen controls. So in the lower left corner, you can click on the on-screen controls. Just clicking on it is going to bring up your position and scale, kind of like what you did in the cut page, but you can zoom this up a little bit. I'm looking at the inspector now, and we are going to click on the auto keyframe button. This sets a keyframe at this parameter on this frame. And then if we move the playhead down about 2/3 of the way, this auto keyframe is automatically on, so anything we do to the zoom X and Y is automatically going to add a keyframe at that point. So I want to set this back to its default size 1.0. You can type it in, but you can also come to the zoom and just double click it and it will return to its default setting. So now we have our animation. A nice little zoom in or a zoom out as we animate it. Now if we want to ease them in and ease them out, that's the first thing you're going to do. We're going to use these little arrows to jump to the first one. The best way to set that ease in is just right click over the keyframe and choose ease out. Go to the next keyframe, right click over it, ease in. Now you have a nice smooth animation.
And that everything is real.
Not so linear. If you want to see the keyframes, you're going to come down into the timeline track itself. There's a little diamond icon. You're going to click on it. And now you have these keyframes here that you can move the effect later or earlier and something like that. You can also look at a curve editor if you want to do a curve editor, and you'll have handles there. We don't really do too much in here. It's actually kind of fiddly. So we just use the right click, ease in, ease out, and show the keyframes for timing, which make it, that's very nice. And then you click on the diamond icon to close it up. Then we turn our attention to caching. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the whole timeline. We're going to go up to caching. So we're going to go up to playback, render cache, and set it to smart. Now anything that needs to be cached will automatically be cached. You can look at our little transition effect here. You can see there's a red line above it. We can zoom in to see that. Since our caching is set to smart, it will automatically start to turn blue, and now we know that it's rendered when there's a blue line above it. So you want to make sure they understand that the smart caching automatically caches. The settings for that are in the project settings. When you come into the project settings, you're going to come down in the master settings to optimize media, where it tells you the cache format and enable background caching after so many seconds, and you can change that. Just make sure you go over that. And then we'll turn our attention to speed changes. We're going to do that on the second to last red marker. I'm going to zoom in. It's that Milky Way shot. The first thing we're going to do is use the change clip speed. So if I want this to go 50% speed, under speed, click on it and enter in 50. Now we have a speed, and it doesn't change the duration of the clip. The clip is still the same duration. We can play it. We have a slower speed clip. Then we're going to turn on the retime controls. You'll have the bar and the arrows and a little new number telling us it's 50% speed. The first thing you're going to do in this retime control is, if you want to make it longer or shorter, you can grab this retime bar and stretch it out or shrink it. But notice that it either opens a gap or overwrites that next incoming clip. However, it works just like trimming. I'm going to undo this trim, this retime, and click on my trim tool. With the trim tool, it's now not going to open up a gap, but it's going to ripple trim as I change the duration with retiming. So the selection tool works for trimming to open up gaps if you want to retime the clip. And the trim tool ripple trims as you retime the clip. Make sure that people understand that, and also make sure that people understand there's a little drop-down menu here that has different controls for the retime control. If you want to set the speed, reset it to 100, we'll choose reverse segment, and now we can play it in reverse slow motion. They'll notice that it's pretty stair-steppy as you play it, so this is a good time to review the retiming and scaling properties in the inspector. You have a retime process, nearest, frame blend, and optical flow. You go over all three of them and then leave it on optical flow, and they'll see the caching happen. And if they leave it alone, it will cache and give you a better result. And that's kind of all we do in the effects. The next lesson, lesson 8, you'll start your audio editing in the edit page.